and welcome to Museums in Science, friendlier than you think. Today we're going to be talking about why you, as science practitioners, should consider museums as both a potential career and a site for you to engage with the public. First, a little about me. I'm Tiffany Iselhart, a public historian who has worked with museums for over 10 years. I currently serve as program developer for Girl Museum, a virtual museum dedicated to celebrating girlhood, and work in development, marketing, and curation at the Kentucky Museum at Western Kentucky University. In my decade working with museums, I've curated over 20 exhibits, produced 3 podcast series, and presented workshops and training for other museum professionals. Recently, I was the supervising curator for Gazing Deeply, the Art and Science of Mammoth Cave, an exhibit at the Kentucky Museum that directly worked with scientists and science illustrators to help our community understand environmental issues at Mammoth Cave National Park and discover how they could help solve these crises. I have also curated exhibits about girls and women in STEM fields, including STEM Girls and STEAM, or STEM Plus Arts, Girls for Girl Museum. Beyond that, I love science. You may think as a historian I'm all about the arts, but truthfully, I love science discoveries, documentaries, and exploration as much as any scientist, and find the fields to be very compatible. So, before we get into specifics, there's one question I always like to ask and answer. Why are museums awesome? There's 2 reasons I love museums. First, they are all about community, meaning that a museum can be about anything relevant and important to the community they represent and serve. This means a museum, depending on its mission, can present about topics in any field and can seek ways to connect seemingly different fields together. Also, I love museums because their impacts are wide-ranging. Much like museums, studying the arts and humanities has profound individual impacts. If you study both arts and sciences, which you can in museums, you are twice as likely to graduate college, 5 times less likely to drop out of school, over 50% more active in your community, and 63% less likely to develop dementia and other memory-related disorders. Now, who wouldn't want that? With that in mind, I want to talk about my most recent exhibit, Gazing Deeply. This physical exhibit isn't just in the museum. It's also on a website where visitors can take a deep dive into historical and scientific topics presented in the exhibit. It's an educational outreach tool, allowing primary, secondary, and university students to engage directly with scientific processes at work in Mammoth Cave. It's a forum where scientists and community members meet to talk about environmental issues and how they can work together, and a platform where scientists can advocate both for their work and for conservation efforts at the cave. Within all of these is the exhibit's primary mission, a site of connection to each other and the Mammoth Cave National Park, which is a huge tourist destination here in the United States. For Gazing Deeply, we brought 4 primary groups together to help create the exhibit. The experts, scientists at Crawford Hydrology Lab, science illustrators from the WKU Department of Art, interpreters and scientists working at Mammoth Cave National Park, and scientists working with Bat Conservation International to address the site's most pressing issue, white nose syndrome, that is killing over 90% of the bat population. We also worked with museum staff, the curators, myself, and select student interns, and the designers, including the museum's exhibit preparation team, graphic designers, and student interns. Finally, we worked with our audience, engaging them to find out what they already knew about Mammoth Cave and how scientists worked there, but also what they didn't know, so that we could explain the cave's issues to everyone, from those who had never heard of the cave to those who visited frequently or even worked there. This shows the true power of museums. When curating an exhibit, we can bring together lots of different people from different fields of study and career paths to work together in achieving a common goal and inspiring others to share in that goal. In this case, it was environmental conservation at Mammoth Cave. But every exhibit needs more than just a great team. It needs a great framework. And this framework is what I want to share with you today, both as a way to explore the exhibition through our 3D tour, but also to teach you a valuable skill that over 90% of employers want: storytelling. In my work, I tell stories. That's what a museum is all about, using images, artifacts, and collaborations to tell stories that people want to hear, but also want to act on. And in telling stories, I use a very specific framework that can be used in museums, in writing papers for class, or even just telling a story to your friends. It's called The 4 Steps to a Great Story. I know, not the jazziest title, but it works. These 4 steps are shown on this slide. First, we get the audience involved. Then we tell them the nitty-gritty details. We follow up with something absolutely mind-blowing, a fun fact, a startling revelation, or something else to jolt you from your seat. Finally, we end with something fun or relevant, or both, that helps the listeners connect with what they've heard. So, step 1. Get the audience involved. We use this in the exhibit by throwing some really provoking things right at the entrance. On the left, you see the exhibit entrance, and yes, that is a recreated cave entrance that you can actually touch. And it feels like real rock, allowing visitors to immediately be transported and wowed. We also put some provoking artifacts on display, including the pair of moccasins on the right, which are over 5,000 years old and were found deep within Mammoth Cave, evidence that indigenous peoples of the region utilized the cave long before we did. Step 2 comes next. What's the story of the cave? This is where we introduce Mammoth Cave, what it is, its history, to viewers. We also introduce something that is surprisingly not something many people know: what scientists actually do in the cave. While the public knows that scientists work there, we found that they often don't know exactly what kind of work that means. So we explained it simply but accurately. Scientists explore the cave by mapping passageways, taking samples, and determining connections between the many branches. They then study the cave by taking samples back to their labs and performing tests, combining them with observations to reach conclusions. They finally share these findings in published reports, presentations, letters, and videos, as well as by collaborating with artists to produce things like the Gazing Deeply exhibit. Within telling the story, we didn't just focus on the boring details. In describing what scientists do, in the picture left, we borrowed actual equipment utilized in Mammoth Cave, showing people the types of current meters and jumars used by real scientists. We also made some surprises that help people visualize what it is we're talking about. On the right, we recreated a 3D cave environment, complete with a background photograph taken in Mammoth Cave and climbing equipment used by explorers, to create a scene that a visitor might stumble upon if they actually visited the cave. It also acts as a pause, right between the storytelling and the mind-blowing moment. We give visitors a chance to absorb what we're talking about and contextualize it. Third, time to blow their minds. This can take many forms, but in Gazing Deeply, we did one thing. We showed how artists and scientists have and continue to work together. In talking about art to science, we had scientists interpret illustrations and paintings of Mammoth Cave made over 100 years ago, helping demonstrate how historical images help scientists understand environmental changes in the cave or the impact of human exploration. We also did the reverse, showcasing how artists use scientific data to create graphics and illustrations that help the public understand what scientists are trying to tell them. We focused on 3 issues at the cave today: air quality, water quality, and white nose syndrome in bat populations, and asked science illustration faculty and students to create over 100 artworks that interpreted actual scientist-produced graphs and reports. The results, like this image, were absolutely stunning. Finally, we end with something fun and relevant. In the closing section, we talked about how scientists and artists work together and how that opens many different career paths, benefits, and even travel opportunities. By studying both the arts and sciences, students at our university can pursue a wide variety of, often very well-paying, careers that have innumerable benefits, including the opportunity to travel to the sister caves in Thailand, the Philippines, and Eastern Europe. So we've seen how gazing deeply really brought the sciences and arts together, telling a story that blows your mind, but also inspires you to help in conservation efforts or even pursue science and art studies. But science exhibits are more than just informational and educational pieces. They can be social justice works too. For Girl Museum, I worked on 2 exhibits in 2017 that did just that. STEM Girls, which sought to understand and showcase how young girls and women have been part of science since the beginning of human history. And STEAM Girls, which looked at how girls use both scientific and artistic skills to contribute to our knowledge of the world. Both exhibits had the same goal: to showcase the history of females working in science, and to inspire the next generation of female scientists around the world, helping break the gender barriers and inequalities that exist in science today. Now, you may be wondering after all this, okay, I've learned some storytelling and about what exhibits can look like or be, but how does that really affect my life or my career? Well, to put it plainly, studying the arts, along with the sciences, can open up a whole host of potential career paths. Scientists work in museums much more than you think. Here in the United States, scientists work in museum laboratories, performing experiments, carrying out research, and contributing to knowledge databases. They also produce things for the museums, such as public programs or scale architectural models, or even, in the most famous case here, Emily Grassley, a scientist by training, was the first ever curiosity correspondent for the Field Museum in Chicago, leading a years-long YouTube series that interviewed scientists working at the museum and showed off what they were working on. Scientists also perform critical work for museums. Some become conservation scientists, performing analysis and treatments on artifacts that help us better understand how they were made and ensure that those objects can be conserved for study and display long into the future. As scientist Catherine Matson discussed while X-ray scanning an artwork, materials analysis using scientific equipment helps museum teams and audiences better understand the techniques and materials used in creating those works, how they've changed over time, and even helping more accurately date artworks and artifacts based on the findings. It's critical for museums to know as much as possible about objects, and scientists provide many keys to helping us accomplish this work. So, through all of this, I hope you've taken away a few things. Notably, I hope you understand 4 key points. Museums are about community, which means that they offer lots of opportunities for you and your work. Like me, scientists rarely work alone. Rather, they collaborate with others, including artists and museums, to help communicate their work to the public. In all this, and in your careers, what you do matters, and it can have a profound impact on today and future generations. Whether through environmental conservation or social justice, museums can help you expand your impact. Finally, and maybe most importantly, as you undertake your studies, consider an extra career path in museums. Pursue an internship, fellowship, or even part-time job working in a museum with conservators, collections, or research. Study the humanities and arts to discover how science permeates them, from helping us identify pigments in famous artworks to developing new methods for conserving or displaying objects. And you may just find a rewarding career path that you never knew about. I hope this talk has been insightful into not only my and my museum's work, but also the potential you have, each of you, in your paths as students and budding scientists, to reach beyond your chosen field and impact others. Most of all, I hope it inspires you to visit your local museums, and in your world travels, to visit other museums as well. There's so much out there to learn and do and be inspired by, and you, dear students, are the key to continuing this for the future. I invite you to look at Girl Museum's online exhibits and visit our 3D tour of Gazing Deeply, where you can explore every single artifact and artwork in the exhibition and see the 4 steps to a great story in action. And if you have questions or want to talk, feel free to reach out to me at Girl Museum. I love meeting new people and talking about science, art, humanities, and museums. Thank you so much for having me, and best wishes for your futures.